All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Effing with the Ineffable. I am Zoe.
And I am Smokey Pingleton.
And welcome to today. This is, I think, episode 28.
Is it? Something like that?
Something like that. Fun fact, my birthday's on the 28th, and I turned 28 this year. So
Wow, it's a golden birthday.
My golden birthday this year. When is your golden birthday? Your birthday's the
When I was 6.
yeah, I guess when you're 6.
It was a while ago.
My kids it's gonna be a while too, because they're 19 and 27.
Oh, well, that's good. They'll be able to remember it anyway. I don't remember my so-called golden birthday.
Yeah. My husband's was when he was 10. I think he did I think he said he went bowling at like Recreation Lanes or something when he was 10 for his golden birthday, which is a bowling alley where we grew up. Anyway.
Back then, it was probably the old Rec Lanes.
Well, he actually might have gone to the one in his hometown. I think it's like Doug's Hilltop. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
I've only been there once. Anyway, this is all uninteresting for people who aren't from where we're from. But yeah, so this is episode 28. So it's my golden episode, I guess. But it also is it's also going to be the last.
We're digging deep, trying to find some meaning here about this number.
It's also the last episode for a little while because next week on this day, I will be packing up a U-Haul and getting ready to move. So
loading up the truck and to move to Beverly.
So we won't have an episode next week, but then after that, we should have more regularity with the episodes and stuff. So we'll have to record that next week's early because then that week after, we're going to be traveling up to Indiana all together.
Well, that's right.
Party. Yeah. Which will be really fun.
Wedding celebration.
Yeah. But today, I don't know, do you have any chatting you want to talk about? Or do you want to get right into the topics?
We've got it's a mixed bag of topics. It's a succotash of topics
we have, I think if I'm right, we have 5 topics today, 3 that my dad kind of suggested and 2 that I want to suggest. I didn't even tell my dad about one of them. But if you ever watch the show Catching Foxes or listen to it, it's a podcast. They do like 10-minute topics on their show where they have like certain rules about theirs where they're like strict about 10 minutes. They have to the other person has to ask a question about it to the person who brought the topic and all that stuff. But I just thought since we had a bunch of stuff we wanted to talk about, why don't we just do a bunch of 10-minute topics? And we have.
Okay, I'll ask you a question about your topic. Why would anyone care?
That should be the first question about any topic that we bring. Also,
exactly.
If it's echoey in here, I'm sorry, but we took off all the wall decorations. I took all the stuff out from under the bed, so we're like bare bones operations here. But that's just the way it is right now.
I'm still down in Joe Biden's basement. Some of the plants have been transplanted.
Yeah.
The cucumbers and the zucchinis. So
we're gonna have to make zucchini bread when I come down.
Tomatoes and peppers out yet?
When I come down, I'm bringing my sourdough, which is healthy and vigorous. So we'll have to make some sourdough zucchini bread and sourdough. I don't know.
Can you make sourdough pizza?
Oh yeah, I do. I haven't in a few weeks because we've been trying to eat up stuff in our house, but usually Saturday night is sourdough pizza crust night.
Nice.
And now that I use white flour, here's a trick for sourdough for any of you parents out there. When I first made my sourdough starter, I made it like totally from scratch. I was using like fresh milled wheat flour, which is nice. And it also it has more of the like wild yeast and bacteria and stuff than like white flour from the store. But it made it really sour, like super strong. So my whole family was like not happy about the sourdough for a while. But then after the sourdough starter got going, I've been feeding it almost exclusively with white flour. I use like unbleached because I don't want the bleach stuff to kill the sourdough starter, but and organic if I can. But anyway, so like white unbleached organic flour.
What would Grandpa say about organic flour?
He would say, "Show me a flour that's not organic." But to that
Yeah.
I say,
show me a flour that's inorganic.
To that I say, it's a misunderstanding of what the term organic means when it's relating to food, not to chemistry.
He'd say it's a misapplication of the word organic.
I mean, it's like organic has two meanings, right? Organic can mean carbon-based, which obviously flour is going to be carbon-based. It can also mean a whole set of things like grown without pesticides, non-GMO, all that kind of stuff. Which that's the part that I care about, because yes, I'm assuming that any flour I buy is going to be carbon-based, or we're going to have some
be actually derived from a plant at some point.
Anyway, so that's my tip. Use white flour, and it makes it a little less sour for.
All right. Again, the question: why would anyone care?
All right. Okay, so you've got 3 and I've got 2. So why don't we just start with you and alternate back and forth? So do you want to talk about your Bitcoin energy article first? Do you want to talk about ACT therapy, ACT therapy first, or do you want to talk about the labor shortage first?
Gosh, they were all good topics. I suggested some good topics. It doesn't matter. But do any of those appeal to you more than any others?
Let's talk about Bitcoin first, because it's the first thing I have written down.
Okay.
Right. I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes. Do you want me to pull up the article, or you want to just chat about it?
We'll just chat about it. It was from was it from the Harvard Business Review?
I'm not sure. Let me look. But
is that the one?
Introduce it, because I started the timer already.
Well, this thing came up and it said, Bitcoin, how that works is it takes a lot of computing power and a lot of energy in order to derive these blockchains. And apparently, the Bitcoin itself, not just cryptocurrencies in general, but Bitcoin itself uses as much power as the country of Sweden.
Which is pretty crazy.
That's what I thought. It's like, oh, wow, I had no idea. And they said that Bitcoin, the actual energy expenditure of Bitcoin may be such that it could potentially raise the world temperature by 2 degrees Celsius.
It is.
Like,
so,
what?
It is from the Harvard Business Review. It's an article entitled, "How much energy does Bitcoin actually consume?" So
the basic idea is it uses a lot of energy to derive these, to so-called mine the Bitcoins. But after that, the transactions are pretty minimal in terms of the energy expenditures.
Also, another point that they made, which I thought was interesting, is that energy use is not equivalent to carbon emissions. And the point that they were making is that I think the point that they were trying to make is that if you take all the energy that they use and estimate, like and assume that it's not renewable energy, then it has a carbon footprint enough that it could raise the global temperature. But they were saying that like in December of 2019, one report suggested that 73% of Bitcoin's energy consumption was carbon neutral, largely due to the abundance of hydropower in major mining hubs such as Southwest China and Scandinavia. But then in September 2020, they figured the number is closer to 39%. But regardless, that's still almost twice as much as the US grid for being like carbon neutral and energy, like renewable energy. So really like the hard thing is trying to figure out where that energy is coming from, because a lot of this data mining, or not data mining, but what's it called, like blockchain mining, whatever it's called, apparently happens in China, where there's a lot of hydroelectric power, and during like the wet season in China, it can almost all of that energy is renewable, or sustainable energy, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But in
apparently this Bitcoin mining can be done anywhere. It's not like coal mining, where it's like, okay, you got to find a place where there's coal. You can do Bitcoin mining, blockchain mining, wherever there's power and computers. So they've set up these things in countries where there's excess energy available, like Iceland and different places where they used to have aluminum mines, actual aluminum mines, because aluminum mining, I guess, takes a lot of, or aluminum smelting takes a lot of energy, and there's much less demand for that these days, I guess. So they're turning these former aluminum processing plants into Bitcoin mining plants now.
Yeah.
Weird.
So I guess the question about all of this is, like, I guess it's not really clear. Like, it seems like we probably don't have to worry so much about Bitcoin specifically, because a lot of it is coming from renewable energy sources. But I guess like a more general question is, like, what are the ethics of like, is Bitcoin something that's valuable enough that even if it was gonna like raise the global temperature 2 degrees, is it worth it? And how do we determine which things are worth it to consume a lot of energy? And like, I don't know, I think there's like a bigger question there. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, we don't. The market does.
Yeah.
If I think it's worthwhile, like if I say, I'm going to use what little gas is available to go on a trip to see Disney World, okay, that's something that I value. Nobody else can say boo about it. If I decide that I'm going to go use what little gas I have available to take a tour of sourdough bakeries throughout the Southeast, okay, somebody else might say, well, that's a complete waste of time to them, but I get to decide. So it's
like,
laissez-faire.
Yeah, clearly, as like more libertarian-minded people, we believe that the government shouldn't have a right to tell private people and businesses how they're using energy, like what they're they don't have the right to make those kind of decisions for private entities. But do you think that we as as an individual have some sort of moral responsibility to use less energy to try to keep our carbon footprint lower? I mean, I think that
I think we probably, yeah, I'm sure we do. Yeah. We're called to be stewards of the earth, and to not use more than we need, and to respect that things are limited.
And I actually, one time in college, I went to a lecture by one of my professors who was talking about the moral implications of things like driving around if you don't have a good reason to do so. Now, this guy he's a utilitarian, like he's a socialist. So, I mean, he would believe that, you know, we
All
like,
property is held in
well,
community.
I think he has a lot more beliefs about like the government should limit your access to things like driving without a reason and that kind of stuff. But I think the more interesting question is like, we always have moral obligations to be like thinking about our actions and the consequences of those actions. Like even when we buy stuff at the store, like we have to think about like if I have a choice between two products, which product is more moral? And we've talked about this before when we talked about like eating meat and like animal treatment and that kind of stuff. But I think that especially now as like sustainable carbon neutral energy sources are becoming more widely available and more cost competitive with like traditional sources, I think that's going to have to be something we think a lot more about in the future. Like right now, we obviously have a duty to our families to not like, to not spend more money than is prudent. But like, in 20 years or something, I'm still going to be like looking for ways to power my house. And I'm going to have to make those decisions about like, should I do solar? Should I have an electric car? You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that those things are easy because I don't think, especially stuff with electric cars, like the energy cost of creating them is more than with traditional cars and that kind of stuff. But I think it's something
Exactly. Yeah. You'd think something like, oh, a Bitcoin, that's just a digitally based thing. That doesn't cost anything to create it. It's not like you have to cut down trees and print, develop inks and print these Bitcoins, these material coins. So it's a great alternative to the material use that goes into most currencies. But that's not true.
Yeah.
And like you said, the same thing is true of like building electric cars. The energy that goes into creating those batteries may well be more than what you would use in fossil fuels throughout the life of a regular gasoline engine car.
Yeah, I did think that was an interesting thing that I wish the article would have touched on is I want to know what the carbon footprint of the amount of dollars and coins that we create every year is, because it's obviously not zero. Like there are trees going into these like dollars, and I think that is like, yeah, of course. It's like there was an article about like a while ago about how almond milk is really bad for the environment because it uses a ton of water to create like an amount of almond milk. But when you do the research, it's the amount of water that it takes to create 1 gallon of almond milk is like 20 times less than the amount of water it takes to create 1 gallon of cow's milk, because you have to give a cow a lot of water, like, and you have to water the plants to feed the cow. So it's like, yeah, of course everything has consequences, but you have to weigh them against the alternatives. And I think we reached our 10 minutes, but I think another interesting point is like, I think Bitcoin could be worth the carbon expenditure, even if it did raise the global temperature, because now the US dollar is going to be so inflated, and Bitcoin is not tied to any government. And I think like those are other serious considerations that we're going to have to weigh. So should we get into our second topic here?
Yes. Second topic.
All right, let's do one of my topics. Do you want to talk about incentives for the vaccination and whether they affect informed consent, or do you want to talk about parental happiness after children? Which topic do you want to talk about first?
Let's talk about the informed consent.
All right, let's do it.
With the vaccines. I didn't know that that's what that article was about. I thought the concern was it doesn't really help. They're using they're using these incentives that are really not health related to get people to take vaccines, but really it has nothing to do with whether the vaccine has any value to them or not.
So I think there's a lot of questions that I want to talk about relating to this whole topic, and we're going to try to do it all in 10 minutes. But so I will link an article below that I sent, but it was talking about how now a lot of governments and private businesses, meaning like state and local governments, are giving incentives for people who are getting the COVID vaccination. So an example, this would be, I think one of the first ones was Krispy Kreme was saying you can get a free donut, what is it, every day if you're vaccinated?
I think every day.
Which is pretty crazy. DC, now this was, I heard this secondhand, but my friend said that DC was giving out free marijuana to people who were vaccinated. And in the article, they also were talking about how there's a lot of places that are giving free beer. And even more interesting, I think, is the state of Ohio had 2 different lotteries going on. Did you read anything about those lotteries? I think it was,
$1 million lottery.
they have $1 million lottery for adults, and I think it's either five or more, like $1 million is being given away every week. If you're vaccinated, if you're a vaccinated adult, you're entered to win. They
got all these federal COVID dollars, and they're using it to fund these sweepstakes.
Yeah. And they also have one for teens where they were giving away complete tuition, room, and board for teens who were vaccinated to go to college tuition free to like an Ohio university or something.
Wow.
So
you could get into a lottery for that.
Yeah, if you're a teen who is vaccinated, I think it's like, what is it, 12 to 17 or something? I don't know. It'll be in the article below. But this raises 2 questions for me. The first one is obviously, well, really 3 questions. First of all, what are our thoughts on the private sector doing this versus the public sector doing this? I think that's going to be an obvious answer. Second, is this effective? That was kind of the whole point of the article that I sent you, is like, are these incentives actually incentivizing people to get vaccinated who otherwise wouldn't? And I think the more important question to me is this affecting informed consent for people who are trying to decide whether to get the vaccination? So first of all, I obviously have no issue with private businesses doing what they want. If Krispy Kreme wants to give vaccinated people a donut every day, they should be allowed to do so. They're not, that's a business decision that they're making, and they should be free to do so. I obviously have huge issues with the fact that, yeah, these federal like COVID money, whatever this is, that they're using to fund these Ohio lotteries, and it's not just Ohio, there's other states doing this too, this is taxpayer dollars that you're using for things that I don't agree with. And I think that like lots of other people don't agree with. I think that that's totally out of line. Do you think that there's any argument for why the government should be allowed to do that? I mean,
well, it's basically an advertisement. It begs the question, should the government have anything to do with this? I guess it's a public health issue, potentially.
I think that's the argument, yeah.
But it's interesting that they're using these things that most people would say are contrary to public health.
Yeah, like donuts and beer and
to incentivize this. Yeah, eat a donut every day. Good golly, that's how I got diabetes and made myself more vulnerable to having COVID complications in the first place.
Exactly.
but you're feeding obesity. You're giving people intoxicants. If it's true that they're giving folks marijuana, it definitely they're giving away beer.
Yeah.
And it sounds like in some of those areas that's actually been maybe funded by the feds too, as
Yeah.
part of the beer thing, the having people go to baseball games
Yeah.
or whatever. um Obviously they've hit a wall as far as the people who are really interested and motivated to get the vaccine.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
and you have to ask yourself, why is it? Because there's not enough donuts at the end of the path to make a difference, or is it because people just don't see the personal value in the vaccine? The vaccines have been uh, delivered free of charge. They've been given away. So if people see any value in them, they're going to be accepting them. But people don't see value in them because, partly because the CDC, until today, it looks like the CDC had been saying, whether you're vaccinated or not, you need to continue to socially
Yeah.
distance, mask, avoid big groups, uh, wash your hands uh, while you're singing happy birthday. And, you
I
know,
mean, that one I agree with.
and you have to have Zoom contact with your loved ones who are
Yeah.
dying because you can't go to, so there's still been all these COVID restrictions that have gone on, even for people who have been vaccinated. The reason why we get vaccinated is so that we're not going to have to be vulnerable and have such constriction on
Yeah.
our life.
And
If
live in
we
fear of something. Like,
Right.
I mean, like, what? Yeah. I,
If
so,
we still have to be afraid, why would we bother to go through the vaccine? And I think that's where a lot of people have been at.
yeah.
Now that they're talking about incentivizing by saying, hey, if you get your vaccine, we're going to suggest that different businesses lighten up on
Yeah.
the restrictions. If you got your vaccine passport, you can eat inside of a restaurant. Well, that's something that might be appealing to people more than getting a beer or a donut.
Yeah. And I think another issue that, isn't really part of this whole incentive programs is that a lot of people are either getting vaccinated or like there's been tons of public polls that say a lot of people wear masks just because they don't want to have the social pressure of having other people look at them differently or whatever. And I think that like for vaccinations, it's going to be the same thing. I think a lot of people who are maybe more hesitant about it are going to get vaccinated just because they don't want to have the social weirdness of like, oh, you're not vaccinated, well, like I don't want to be around you or whatever that is. But I think whether all these incentives are making a difference, like I don't know if it's making a real impact. Like they talk in the article about how vaccine, like people who are getting vaccinated per day is going down in a lot of these areas because there's a lot of people who are getting the vaccine. Like people who want to get the vaccine are getting the vaccine. And I don't know, even if you were giving me the chance to win $1 million, I still wouldn't want to get the vaccine. So I think there's a lot of people like me who are more hesitant about it. I do want to talk about like informed consent, but what were you going to say?
I was going to say there's a lot of questions underlying this as far as what motivates people in the first place to
Yeah.
do a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one of the social psychology experiments that they talked about when I was in grad school was they went out to these ball fields, and they found a bunch of kids who were playing ball just spontaneously,
Mhm.
obviously internally motivated to
Yeah.
do so. What they said was, hey, this is great. We like that you guys are doing this. We're going to pay you to continue to play ball. Um, and the kids that they paid to play ball played less ball subsequently because they looked at it as being a job.
Yeah.
They looked at it as being something that must have been an infringement on them,
Mhm.
that they would have to be paid to do it.
Yeah. Well,
You
that's
know,
another
and
question
and
is like,
that's the same thing with the vaccine. If I have to be paid to take the vaccine, there must be something about it that's a little distasteful, because
exactly.
I don't do things. uh, I don't usually get paid to do things that are good for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Well, like,
unusual.
here's an example is like, um, I don't want to use like a crude example, but like people are highly motivated to eat ice cream because it tastes good. They're
Right,
motivated enough to do it that they will pay to do it. Uh,
right.
and if you said to me like, "Hey, I will pay you to eat ice cream," it's like, okay, I'm already doing that, so whatever. But like, what's the incentive for wanting to pay me to eat ice cream? If you have to offer all these incentives to get vaccinated, it's like, well, like you're
It
claiming,
makes people wonder.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're claiming that this is like totally safe and effective and like risk free and all this stuff. Like, why am I having to be incentivized to do this? I think that's a really good point about,
Really, if they wanted to sell it, they need to make it illegal. They need to say, oh, dude, if for everybody who brings in 3 cans of beer, we'll allow you to get
yeah,
a vaccine.
exactly.
Well, if for everybody who's willing to pay $5, we're willing to give you a vaccine. Make it something that costs somebody something, and they'll think it's of value to them.
Yeah,
If you are paying them to take it, they think that they have become now the garbage man who has to haul off your
yeah,
trash.
you're
That you're
doing them a favor.
what you're giving away is not only without value, it actually is a disposal problem.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
just like if you think about it as like a numbers game, it's like you have to pay this much to make it neutral for me, so it's obviously worth negative that much. Anyway, I just think we reached 10 minutes again, but I wanted to make one quick point about informed consent. Like, informed consent is the idea, usually in the medical field, of permission granted in the knowledge of the possible consequences, typically that which is given by a patient to a doctor for treatment with full knowledge of the possible risks and benefits of a treatment. And there's 4 principles of informed consent, which are: you must have the capacity to make the decision, you must disclose the information, including the risks and benefits and the likelihood of both, you must be able to comprehend the information, or you must comprehend it, not be able to, because that's the first part. And then the fourth is voluntarily grant consent without coercion or duress. And I think like this is a question, is like, are all these incentives taking away from your informed consent by coercion or duress?
I would argue that they're not, that it's not coercion. The coercion would be more along the lines of when you say, hey, the if you don't have your vaccine passport, you can't join in all the reindeer games.
Yeah, yeah,
That's coercion or duress. I mean, that's
yeah,
saying that if you don't comply with this, there's going to be a punishment,
yeah,
because you're going to be excluded from certain privileges that other people are going to have that you're not going to have. That would be more the issue. Giving people incentives to do things, that doesn't necessarily take away from their informed consent. Um, the thing that takes away from informed consent here is there's no information. It's
Yeah.
also new. It's also new. Nobody knows what the long-term effects of this is going to be.
Yeah.
Are people who are getting this vaccine gonna start, growing a second head out of their shoulder blade? What's gonna happen? Who knows?
Yeah.
We're talking about RNA stuff.
Mhm.
Uh, this is all brand new technology,
Yeah.
brand new stuff. We're throwing it out there as though it's completely safe. It may well be. I guess that's the expectation. I'm pretty sure that they don't want to kill a big percentage of the population. I hope
Yeah.
not.
There are people who argue, I mean, like, Bill Gates always talks about that the fact is the world is overpopulated, and coincidentally, he had a huge part in funding the COVID vaccination. But I think, like, obviously that's a conspiracy
So Bill
theory.
Gates talks out of both sides of his mouth. He's saving people with his so-called foundation. He's going around saving lives. He ought to be incentivizing people to kill themselves if he really thinks there's too many people. Come on, Bill. A little bit of integrity here, man.
So I do agree with you that at least legally, I was talking to my husband about this before. At least legally, coercion is defined as compulsion, force, or duress. And even bribery has to be a quid pro quo as far as like the legal definition of bribery. It has to be like a legal service that you're giving money for. So like, I don't think that legally you can say that these incentives are coercion or bribery. However,
Right.
I do think they're affecting your decision to make a rational decision about weighing the risks and the benefits.
That's the intention. The
Especially,
intention is to get people more agreeable to making that decision.
yeah. And I think that this is especially true of people who are extremely poor. I think that people who are really poor, who are like, I don't have a chance of going to college on my own because my parents don't have any money to send me to college. Maybe I should get vaccinated so that I have the chance. I mean, I think that I just think that that's not it. It's a scummy thing to do, whether it's illegal or legal or not. I think it's wrong, especially because you're using taxpayer money. I think that once again, if you're a private business, if you're Krispy Kreme and you want to offer donuts to whoever, go ahead. I think that's fine. I do think that I don't know if you saw this tweet yesterday from President Biden, who said, the rule is now simple. Get vaccinated or wear a mask until you do. The choice is yours. Now that is coercion, right? Like that's what you were saying. Like that's the coercion of saying you no longer have the choice is yours, but the choice is you can pick to have your freedoms or you cannot. And it's like, well, then you really are getting into murky territory about coercion.
Choice is yours. There's two kinds of shots. There's a shot from a gun and there's a shot from a
vaccination.
Which
Anyway,
would you prefer?
I think that we definitely went over our 10 minutes on that topic, but I think that there's a lot there, and I think it's interesting. So I don't know.
But it does kind of lead some of that as far as government interference leads into maybe that labor shortage, unemployment situation.
Sure.
The whole dynamic where there are just tons of jobs that are available that people are not signing up for. McDonald's was offering people $50 to just come in and interview for a job. Just come in and let us make a pitch for working at McDonald's. Holy crap, it used to be that they would have to turn people away, that they would have their pick of people. Now they don't. Why is that?
Yeah.
Couple of the main reasons are people are getting paid to stay home. These unemployment benefits which are very generous, um, are basically paying people to stay home. And if you get a job, you lose your unemployment benefits.
Mm-hmm.
So the incentive there is I can get checks sent to my house and I don't have to go out and work. I get to continue to binge watch Fargo, uh, or I could go get a job at McDonald's.
Yeah.
Um,
Have someone tell me what to do all day. I mean, I think
um, am I missing something? Is there another catch? Is there another catch? I
yeah.
mean, or no,
And
no, there's
just,
not another catch. There's not
yeah.
another immediate consequence to you for making that choice. There's a consequence to society for choosing to be idle and not being productive. And there's a consequence, I believe, to your spirit and
Definitely.
your sense of self-worth and dignity. To get paid to do nothing, you start to believe that maybe that's all I'm good for.
Yeah.
All I'm good for is nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And being good for nothing used to be a bad thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
That used to be an insult. You're good for
that
nothing.
used to, hey, you're a good for nothing. Thank you. Continue to send me checks
Yeah.
for doing nothing. I appreciate it. It's like, ay. So yeah, it's government interference in the labor market. Plus, the other thing that's affected people, it's especially affected women, especially single parent families, single mothers. Um, the fact that schools have been not open
Yeah.
have basically taken away their free childcare,
Yeah.
which means that part of the incentives for some of these corporations is going to need to be, if you want to get good employees, you might have to offer childcare on site.
Yeah.
You might have to make more accommodations for parents. Um, and that's probably not a bad idea in and of itself.
Yeah, I mean, if a private company wants to do that, I think that's great. Like, especially all these companies who talk a lot say a lot of words about the fact that, oh, we love diversity. We want equity between men and women in the workplace and all this stuff. And it's like, well, if you really want that, make it so that
Put your money where your mouth is.
yeah, but make it so that people have more of a free choice of, okay, well, if I have nothing holding me back, if you are providing childcare for me, if you're making it so that I can have more of this like work-life balance and not have to worry about my family, then maybe that is worth it to me. And I think not only, we mentioned the unemployment stuff, but I think the stimulus checks, like, yeah, are the stimulus checks enough that you're not working at all? Probably not for most people, but I mean, like, how many more
Certainly takes away from your need for money.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you've got all that extra money. Our family got like thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
I was working, your mom has been working the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't need stimulus money. We cashed the checks. We're not fools.
Yeah.
But we didn't need it.
Yeah.
It just kind of, and it feeds inflation in a huge way.
Yeah.
They say it doesn't, but it does.
Mm-hmm.
It has to. It's
Yeah.
just the nature of the market. You throw more money in, the value of every single dollar becomes less when there's more and more dollars stacked up.
Yeah. I think that another interesting point that they made in the article, kind of showing that it probably is these two factors that are affecting it, is that the teen job market right
Mm-hmm.
now is recovering very well. And like part of the reason for that is because, first of all, I'm sure it's because places like McDonald's. There's like teens are qualified for those jobs.
They have to take a chance on these. They usually wouldn't take a chance on teens because teens are flaky.
Yeah.
You know,
But
teens
they're better
are
than nothing.
they're
Chance
unstable.
is better than
They
nothing.
tend to be unstable. But you know, you just need a breathing body in there who can say, "Do you want fries with that?"
Yeah.
And, you know,
And like obviously teens aren't subject to, like, teens didn't get any of the stimulus and unemployment benefits. I mean,
right.
if they were eligible for a stimulus, it went to their parents, not to them. But also, like, they don't have, most teens don't have children in school, so they don't have to worry about the whole childcare issue. I think that this also brings up a really interesting point about which Austin Peterson, who is a libertarian who ran for president, he made the point that, like, this whole labor market right now is pretty good proof that, like, UBI is a bad idea. The
Right.
whole idea of, like, universal basic income, people are always like, especially people like Andrew Yang, who ran on a platform promoting UBI, they always say, you know, this actually incentivizes people to work because they can take a risk and start a business with the money that they have and all this stuff. It's like, okay, then why aren't we seeing that? Why aren't we seeing tons of people employed on their own, like with their businesses because of their unemployment and stimulus?
Why would you start a business when there's no labor available?
I mean, like,
Unless it's a business that you yourself are your only employee.
yeah,
Which is basically a kind of a, I mean, you're giving yourself a job is what you're doing then,
yeah,
which is what a lot of people do, and that's fine. And people who have the ambition to do that, it's great. There's a lot of people who don't have the ambition to do that, and if you pay them enough money, they'll settle for that, and they'll just stay home. They won't be engaged in the gross domestic product. They won't be productive.
yeah. I think,
They'll continue to consume because they need to, being
yeah,
a body, but they're not going to produce.
yeah. I just what was I gonna say? I don't remember now. I think this whole thing is really interesting, and it brings up a point about kind of all these, like, socialist welfare policies in general. Like, people, I think it just goes to prove that, like, when push comes to shove, in reality, these policies don't work the way that you think they're going to work. Like, of course, universal basic income is a nice idea in the sense that, like, yeah, nobody's going to starve to death because everybody gets some money, even if it's just enough to subsist. But it's like, in reality, they're like, these things just don't work. Society breaks down when we don't incentivize people to work, because
And
also
it makes,
work is good for you.
makes people useless, and it makes people weak.
Yeah,
They're no longer involved in having to take care of their lives, and because they don't have that investment in their own life becomes less valuable to
yeah,
them.
yeah, exactly. I think that the suicide rate would go up a lot if we implemented UBI, because there would be a lot of people who would just sit at home, and if you're never aiming towards something, you're just lost. And I think a lot of people are like that. They're just kind of lost, and they don't if you don't have that drive for, like, I need to fulfill my basic needs, then you're quickly gonna go down a bad path. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's my
Well,
theory.
it's stressful to be involved in any activity that makes any kind of demands on you. But if you don't use it, you lose it. You know, you if you're not involved in taking care of yourself, if you're not involved in making good things in your life happen, then you lose the capacity to do that,
Yeah.
and you lose the interest in that. You just kind of, you know, they came out recently with all this languishing talk, where they said, oh, people languished while they were stuck in the home during COVID because they weren't able to get out and thrive. They were their routines that had helped them be flourishing prior were eliminated, and they didn't find anything to really replace that.
Yeah.
And so they just started to languish. That's how it works. And
Yeah.
then people will be uncomfortable and miserable, and they'll look for easy way outs, either suicide or the slow suicide of drug addiction,
Yeah.
and just turning off your head and being out of your life,
Yeah.
um, experientially, if not existentially.
Yeah. And I think that the only way we derive meaning is from aiming at something and working towards something. Like we don't actually get meaning from achieving a goal. We get meaning from working toward that goal.
Pursuing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's and so it's just like a fundamental misunderstanding of human nature. Well, that was 10 minutes. Do we want any last
Well,
words?
that can bring us also to the whole ACT thing, because that's kind of an ACT principle. ACT stands for Acceptance and Commitment Therapy. And the whole idea behind that is people do not always act on their own values because they're not always aware of options as far as that.
Yeah.
So the whole idea of ACT is to help people to be in the moment, to be present to yourself in the moment, to be conscious, to be aware and mindful of, okay, these are the thoughts that I'm having, these are the urges that I'm having, but to be a more savvy consumer of your thoughts, and to recognize that many of the thoughts that I have are just habitual thoughts, automatic negative thoughts, presuppositions, assumptions, prejudices, uh, things that we learned growing up that are not necessarily helpful to our lives, and certainly do not necessarily coincide with what we consider to be a mission in our life and a value in our life. We do not act on our values because we don't even consider our values, and we just kind of have these default thoughts and these default reactions that are not helpful to us.
Yeah.
And so what ACT suggests is that we be able to be aware of our thoughts, recognize the thoughts that we're having, recognize that they're stories. They're one story among many, that there are other alternative possibilities that may be considered, and to be more savvy about choosing those. Ask yourself, is this helpful for me to live a life that's meaningful to me? As Matthew Kelly says, is this helping me to be my best self?
Mm-hmm.
The best version of me. And if it's not, then you're selling yourself short, and you need to take a step back and say, okay, why do I keep getting hijacked? I keep wanting to be the best version of me, and I keep having these ideas about what I want to be doing with my life. However, things get in the way. Why is that? So it's ACT is something that I feel has personally been something that I can use to keep myself on track better. And it's something that I really recommend as a self-help process, to read The Happiness Trap or something. There's plenty of stuff available on the internet to be able to look up. It's part of the cognitive behavioral therapy, which is the gold standard of therapies these days, it seems like.
Yeah.
the evidence-based treatment
Yeah.
of depression, anxiety, things like that. And it's just, it's good stuff.
Yeah, I think we've mentioned The Happiness Trap before. The Happiness Trap is a book by Russ Harris, who it's basically like an intro to ACT therapy. Pretty easy to read and really good and helpful. And the hard and the good thing about the book is that it actually gives you exercises to do. And it's like, stop and do this exercise. If you don't do it, you're never gonna get better at this. Like that's actually the hard part about ACT therapy is it's like, it's really hard in the moment when you are in the midst of depression and anxiety.
When you're hijacked, when your
Yeah.
emotions are hijacked.
Yeah. To
by something.
stop and do those things. And that's why it is helpful to practice those things in lower stress moments, right? Because then you can kind of rewire your brain a little bit to not immediately just fall into whatever your brain is telling you. And I think a really helpful part about the happiness trap that he talks about in the intro is like, there's a reason your brain is telling you all these negative thoughts all the time. There's an evolutionary reason for those things. Like, we are evolved to always be looking for danger because that's how you not get eaten, right? Like, that's how you not get eaten in the wild.
The way you deal with trouble is anticipate it, avoid it, evade it, fight it off, you know? And so, but if you don't recognize that it's coming, it's going to eat you before you even are conscious of it.
Yeah.
So we anticipate, as Jordan Peterson said, the snake bird.
What is it? Cat, snake, bird, I think?
Cat, snake, bird, the dragon.
Yeah.
The cat, snake, bird conglomerate that was our archetypal enemy.
Yeah. And most of us live in a place where we're not constantly having physical threats to our health all the time. So our brain is looking for other threats. Like, Jordan Peterson talks about like that bill from the IRS that you have on your desk that you haven't opened yet. Like, that is a snake in there, right? Because like when you open that, you don't know what's going to come out at you, but it's going to be a threat. I think that like understanding the evolutionary origins of kind of those bad thoughts and stuff is helpful, especially like I had really bad with my first daughter. I had really bad postpartum anxiety. I've kind of struggled with like depressive tendencies my whole life, but I've never had anxiety until after she was born. And I remember there were times where it's so dumb looking back on it, but it's like she was newborn, I was exhausted, I hadn't slept in days, but I could not sleep because every time I wasn't looking at her, all I could think is she's gonna fall, she's gonna get hurt, she's gonna fall out the window. Like for some reason, my thoughts were always like she's gonna fall out the window, which doesn't like why would that happen? But like, I mean, if you think about it, it's like. And what they would say in the happiness trap is like, thank you, brain. Like, yeah, thank you. I do need to look out for this little child who can't take care of themselves. That is a huge responsibility, and I need to be aware of that. But me sleeping is going to help me take care of her better than constantly like being hyped up and worried about it all the time and like having to keep my eyes on it.
Yeah. To treat this as a crisis is not going to be helpful.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I really find refreshing about the ACT relative to most cognitive behavioral therapies is a lot of cognitive behavioral therapies want to take a look at those cognitions and dispute them or reject them or reframe them or whatever. ACT says, don't do that. You're just playing games.
Mm-hmm.
Just note the thought.
Yeah.
Recognize that it's a story, so diffuse the intensity of it, but don't reject it. Just ask yourself, is there another story that may be more helpful for me to meet my goals?
Yeah.
And so don't Don't get into that, oh, I'm a bad person for thinking that, you know. No, you're not. It's a thought. It's a thought that got generated in your brain.
Yeah.
All kinds of bizarre thoughts get generated in your brain. You can choose among them, you
Yeah.
know. Doesn't make you a bad person, doesn't mean they're right, doesn't mean they're wrong, doesn't mean they're true, doesn't mean they're false. You have the way to judge them is it helpful for me in
Yeah.
living a life that is rich and meaningful and has applies the values that I really think that when I really sit and think, my better angels tell me this is how you ought to live your life, you know. And if
Yeah.
and if things are keeping me from doing that, then I need to sort them out and just say, oh, there's that story again. That story that says that, you know, pain is terrible and that you ought to immediately try to get comfortable because any kind of pain is awful. That's what leads to addiction. That's what leads to avoidance. That's what leads to all kinds of terrible problems.
Yeah.
That's another part of the ACT that I really like is they talk about this experiential avoidance that people go through,
Mhm.
you know, trying not to experience any discomfort. Life is pain, princess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anybody who tells you something else is trying to sell you something, and don't sell yourself on that either.
Yeah.
Life can be painful. That's okay. There's different kinds of pain. There's the pain that comes from avoiding things, and there's the pain that comes from facing things.
Hmm.
One of those helps you to grow and change and become stronger. One of them makes you weaker and wet your pants and hide in the corner.
Yeah.
You know, what do you want to be doing? You know?
Yeah. I like that he also talks about how we categorize a lot of emotions as negative, of like anger and sadness. Like we feel like those are negative emotions, but like those we it's funny because my husband and I were talking about the movie Inside Out the other day. Have you seen that movie?
Yes. Yeah.
I think that like that movie has a good premise, but I don't think it was executed well. But I think the point of like sadness has a purpose, and I think that like that's an important thing. Like it's it's sometimes good to be sad. It's sometimes good to be angry. Like we don't have to
It's
think of those.
sometimes good to be worried.
Yeah, if it helps you,
If,
it
if
helps
there's a
motivate
if
your
there's
action towards your
a, if
value.
there's a yeah, if there's a threat that is approaching that you need to deal with, it's better to know about it than to be an ostrich and put your head in the sand and just say, no problems here.
Yeah.
I can't fix. I know nothing.
Well, and that was our 10 minutes, but I actually think this kind of goes into my last topic that I wanted to talk about, which I didn't even bring up to you before. But I'm reading this book right now called Crib Sheet by Emily Oster. Emily Oster is a economist who like wrote two books. She wrote a book, or two books so far. She has another one coming out soon, but she wrote one called Expecting Better, which is all about looking at the data of these different studies that inform pregnancy and birth choices. Basically, things like, okay, why is the recommendation that pregnant women don't drink more than 2 cups of coffee a day? Why is it the recommendation that pregnant women never drink alcohol at all? Like, is that really justified, or is it okay to have a drink every once in a while and whatever? That was her first book. Her second one is very similar, but it's about basically ages 0 to 5 for your kids. Different things like, what's the evidence on potty training? What's the evidence on sleep training? What's the evidence on, feeding your kids, that kind of stuff. So she's looking at like the actual studies.
What's truly helpful?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So the very last section that I'm in right now is about parental happiness after you have children, like your marital satisfaction and stuff. And she says that like studies, I think going back to the 70s, have shown that after you have children, couples typically decrease their happiness in like in their marriage. And I think that's really interesting because I feel like my husband and I are way happier now than before we had kids. And
Mm.
I think that like I actually think like I kind of want to bring Catholicism into this last point. I think that like the whole idea of the vows that you make in a Catholic marriage and the whole idea of natural family planning and being truly open to like God's will for like for you to have children. I think that's a way, even if you just want to view it as like a utilitarian way to increase your marital happiness, as opposed to people who perfectly plan out every pregnancy they have, decide exactly when and when not to have children. I think that when you start doing that kind of stuff, you start looking at children as something that you can
A
own,
commodity,
manipulate,
a
and, yeah,
commodity that you've produced.
yeah. And it's something that you can control. And it's something that like is, I'm only going to do this if it adds value to my life. And it's like, well, there's a lot of things about kids that are hard. Like she talks about the fact that a lot of reasons for decreased marital satisfaction are you have less time to spend with each other, which is presumably true, I guess, because you're spending more time taking care of children.
Kind of
Um,
stands to reason. You either have less time for each other or less time for yourself, or both.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Less sleep, which sleep actually has a huge impact on your mental health, and so like it can really affect your relationships. Um, Less physical intimacy with your spouse. It's been shown that most people have less physical intimacy after you have kids because once again you're spending more time taking care of other kids. Sometimes your kids aren't sleeping well at night or whatever.
And
But
you're getting, and for women, especially when you have young kids, you're getting touched all the time. You don't have a craving for being touched.
yeah,
You don't have a touch hunger
yeah,
that most people have.
yeah.
You know,
Moms talk a lot about being touched out and just being like, at the end of the
yeah,
day, I don't want to be touched anymore, which is true.
just
I mean,
leave
that's
me
a
alone.
valid thing. That's definitely a valid thing. And I guess this is more of like I don't really have a lot of like answers to this, besides I do think that the Catholic view of things is tremendously helpful in this aspect. I don't know a lot of truly practicing Catholic people who are less happy after having kids than before having kids. I don't know if that's just because it like doesn't get talked about or something, but I feel like having kids can greatly benefit your marriage because you gain an appreciation for the other people, at the other person, not just as a partner but as a co-parent, and you see them like truly loving and sacrificing for your child, and it makes you appreciate like them and their willingness to sacrifice
And
for
you have that
the
shared mission. You have
yeah,
that shared mission. Um, I think the people who are not happy uh, after they have children are people who are, I don't want to be too pejorative about it, but they're selfish.
okay,
Their
so that was
their
one of my questions.
their own self needs are not being as catered to,
Yes,
and they feel neglected. They feel deprived. They feel jealous of the relationship of the child with their spouse. They feel like, oh, my partner doesn't love me as much now because they're not spending as much time or adoring me or pleasing me or whatever.
yeah,
It's like, get over yourself, man. That's
yeah,
if that's what your life is about. If your life is about my will be done, yeah, you're gonna be less happy when you have other obligations.
and
You
people in
know,
the way to
because you're not
yeah,
you're not gonna be able to be as willful, uh, as self-willful
yeah.
uh, you were before. Stands to reason.
So so those were some of my questions from a somebody who has counseled married couples and whatever before. I guess my question is like, is it really people becoming less happy, or is it just kind of emphasizing problems that were already there? is it mainly like a selfishness issue? Because that, it seems to me like there was a tweet that came out on Mother's Day from, I don't know, somebody who is well known, who was saying like, I think we should talk more about people who regret having kids, because that's such a taboo topic and all this stuff. And I mean, there was a lot of people who were replying and saying like, I regret having children because it like a lot of moms specifically who came out and said, I regret having children because they take up all my, this is a less,
all my time.
yeah, this is a less sensitive way of my less sensitive way of putting it, but it's basically like they take up all my time and I had to sacrifice my career for my kids. And it's like, okay, like, and then it's funny because the Babylon Bee, you know, which is like,
you got the foreground and the background mixed up. What's
yeah.
that?
I gotta find their tweet about it. It was really funny. It was like, hold on one second, let me find it.
It's like my mission in life is my kids.
Yeah.
The reason why I work is not a end in itself. It's a means to support my family. It's a good means. It's something that I personally enjoy. I feel like it's a spiritually and emotionally and intellectually challenging situation that helps me to continue to grow and helps me to continue to overcome the selfishness that I'm so damn prone to.
Yeah. I mean, like everybody is selfish. Like in a way, we all struggle with it, and it's hard.
Yeah.
Like it's hard to always.
It comes from being a body that is distinct from other bodies. We tend to think that our body is more important than any other body, that my mind is more important than any other mind, that my thoughts are more important than other people's thoughts. They're more important to me.
Yeah.
But should they be? Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Again, going back to ACT, is that helpful for me to think that I should be entitled, or that I'm the center of the universe?
Yeah.
Or that my life really about self-fulfillment?
Yeah.
Or is my life really about, you know, from the Catholic perspective, self-giving, self-sacrificing?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's where my true meaning comes from.
The tweet from the Babylon Bee, which I loved, was, shame. This woman gave life to a beautiful child, completely missing out on a soul-crushing corporate career. And I was just like, that. I mean, it's true. It's like why? I guess like why do you feel like your career? I just don't. There's a lot about it that I just don't get. Like I think that truly it's people who are there's people I know who are like this, who feel like they regret having kids because they feel like it takes away from their ability to fulfill what they want to do. But I think all of those people
generally materially.
Yeah.
But either materially or in terms of some sort of worldly view of success.
Yeah.
You know, did you make money? Did you get power? If you want to make money and get power, being a parent is not a good program.
But I also
but
feel
if you want to put love into the world and see love happen,
yeah,
that's, you know, it's the toughest job you'll ever love.
Yeah. I feel like those people who say like, man, I could have accomplished all these things if I didn't have kids to get in the way. I think that those people truly wouldn't have accomplished anything more if they didn't have kids. It's just a convenient excuse for you not doing what you like, not trying hard enough. There are very few things that I feel like kids really stop you from doing. If you really want to have a career, you can have a career and still raise your kids and be a good parent. I just think that like all of those things are a externalization of your internal dissatisfaction with yourself. And I think that that's really cruel to do to a kid, because it's not their fault that you
blame them.
Yeah.
And you know, coming from, as you said, somebody who's counseled a lot of people, Generally, when somebody's depressed, the first thing they look at is, why is my marriage failing to make me as happy as I should be?
Yeah.
What makes you think your marriage is supposed to be making you happy?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, Happiness is a do-it-yourself project.
Mhm.
Happiness is a way of traveling. It's not a destination.
Yeah.
Happiness is not a it's not a condition. It's a process.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, you need to reconsider what your process is and what you want to be happy about, and start to feel gratitude for the things that you have. If you want to be happy, look around you and look for things to be happy about.
Yeah.
Instead, but when people get depressed and miserable, uh, they tend to want to blame other people, and it's usually their spouse.
Oh,
Uh, and the problem isn't their marriage. Their problem is they're depressed,
yeah.
and they've fallen into a slump, and they need to change their way of living a little bit.
Yeah. I'm really grateful that my husband and I were able to make it through, because I feel like I used to be one of those people who was like, I thought I would be happier after getting married, and I was not because marriage is really hard. Um, like in the first year after our marriage, I thought it was like rough. It was a hard time. But now, like, our marriage is so much better after having kids. I don't know. I just like, I think,
Because your life is more rich and meaningful. You're more involved in things that you feel are important and precious.
yeah.
You're more alive.
And it's
You're
not
more.
easy. Like, it is not easy. My husband and I had
No.
a serious discussion this week about like our plans for the future, because and I said, like, we were debating between two options, serious options for the future, which are really going to impact the course of our next 5 years. And I'm saying, if we were married and didn't have kids, this decision would be really easy. But the fact that we have kids and we have to like take them into consideration is a serious, like, it seriously complicates things. But like, not in a way that I would ever trade it for the alternative. Like, just because it complicates things doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that I have a lot more responsibility in my life. I have a lot more like things that I need to think about, and my actions don't just affect myself. But once again, like we've talked about this lots of times, voluntarily choosing to pick up responsibility is the only way that you get meaning in life. And that's like why kids are so awesome, is because not only are they your sanctification, your means of sanctification, as is your spouse. Dealing with your spouse and dealing with your kids is a means of sanctification, but it's also the way that you get meaning here and now. And that's a great thing. And I'm really grateful to have kids, because
Yeah.
the best.
Me too. It reminds me of a story that our deacon told us in church a while ago. I think I might have mentioned it before. He was talking about this guy named Harmon Killebrew. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He was a baseball player for the Minnesota Twins or something. He was a great baseball player. And when he was growing up, his family used to play baseball in their front yard. They would play wiffle ball. They would have a softer ball, and they'd hit it and they'd run around, and they totally tore up the yard. They completely had base paths and everything. And the neighbors, one of the neighbors said to the dad, "Oh man, your yard is all torn up. You must feel terrible about that." He said, "I'm not raising grass."
Oh, you've been told that story before. I like that. That's great.
I'm not raising grass.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what the lawn looks like.
Yeah.
It does not matter. It does not matter what my career looks like. It does not. Put what matters first.
Yeah.
What matters matters, and if what you're doing is helpful to what really matters, great. if what you're doing is not helpful to what really matters, if it's somebody else, somebody else has an objection to it, whatever, that's your choice. You want to have a nice lawn, great. Lock the kids in the basement.
Yeah.
If you don't want them to walk on the yard.
It's like in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, like they talk about Cameron. I think they make a point that like his house was like a museum and you could never touch anything. But it's like,
right.
yeah, but he's an unhappy person. And I think like, yeah, this is, we can wrap this up because we've been going for a while, but my husband and I we're starting to think about buying a house and all this stuff, and it kind of seems like a really big decision and like this huge decision because we've never bought a house before. But really I was like, you know what? We've lived in some really crappy apartments. We've lived in some nice apartments. We've lived all over the place. And I feel like everywhere we've lived, we've found ways to be happy because we just like each other and we like make each other like, it's more the love that we have in our family that makes us happy rather than the house that we live in. So I'm really
it's not a house that makes a home, it's a people that make a home.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that's the same thing with the marriage. It's not like the circumstances of like how often you're having sex and how much sleep you get and how often you have time to focus on each other that's going to make you happy. It's the amount that you're focusing on what's important and like striving towards a common goal of hopefully raising your kids well and getting closer to each other and to God, that's going to make you have a good marriage. So
no, I'd have to dispute that. I'd have to say it's about the sex and cooking.
All right. Well, on that note, I think we should.
Wait, no.
But thank you for watching this.
Sorry about that. That's a joke.
I think we went on a little longer today, but that hopefully will keep you busy for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, and then we'll catch up after that. Maybe we'll be broadcasting in person.
I hope so. We'll see. So,
yeah.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us. Go pray for your spouse today if you have one.
Vaya con Dios.
All right.
Pray to be the right person rather than to find the right person.
True.
Or to change your spouse into the right person. That's talk about a recipe for misery.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right. Bye, everybody.